The stars had always been peaceful for the Valkyrie collective, and for 3,000 years, their people had known nothing but harmony among the cosmos. They were scholars who studied the mysteries of black holes, artists who painted with light itself, and traders who connected distant worlds through bonds of friendship and commerce. They had never built a single warship because they believed the galaxy had grown beyond such primitive things as war and conquest, but now death was coming for them. And it moved through the void with terrible purpose. Ambassador Sylith stood before the great window of her ship as it raced toward a distant blue world called Earth. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with shades of deep purple and frightened orange, colors that revealed her terror to anyone who knew how to read Valkyrie emotions. Behind her, the holographic display showed the enemy fleet, 2,000 warships of the Drath hegemony, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. The Drath had sent their demands 3 weeks ago. Surrender all territory, submit to enslavement, or face total annihilation. The Valkyrie High Council had tried to negotiate, tried to offer tribute, tried everything peaceful beings could try. The Drath had laughed and continued their advance. How long until they reach our homeworld? Sylith asked her pilot. 47 days, Ambassador. Maybe less if they push their engines harder. 47 days until everything her people had built would burn. 47 days until billions of innocent souls would either die or be dragged away in chains. Sylith closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the old gods her people had stopped believing in centuries ago. Earth grew larger in the window, a beautiful sphere of blue oceans and green lands wrapped in white clouds. Humanity lived there, the newest species to join the galactic community. They had discovered faster than light travel only 80 years ago, a blink of an eye compared to the ancient civilizations that ruled the stars. The elder races viewed humans with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Sylith had read the reports about humanity. They were short-lived creatures, rarely surviving more than a century. They were emotional and unpredictable, prone to violence over small disputes. They had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years before finally achieving unity. Many in the galactic community believed humans were simply too young and too aggressive to be trusted with advanced technology, but the Valkyrie had no other choice. The elder races had refused to intervene, claiming the Drath invasion was not their concern. Humanity was the only species that might answer their call for help. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Sylith marveled at the world below. Great cities stretched across the continents, connected by networks of light and energy. Enormous ships floated in the oceans and flew through the skies. These humans had transformed their planet in ways that would have taken other species millennia to achieve. She landed at a place called Geneva, where the United Terran Assembly gathered to make decisions for all of humanity. Human guards in crisp uniforms escorted her through corridors of polished stone and gleaming metal. She noticed how they moved, these humans, always alert and watchful, like predators who never truly relaxed, even in their own territory. The assembly chamber was vast and filled with representatives from every nation on Earth. Sylith felt small as she approached the central platform, surrounded by thousands of human eyes. At the head of the chamber sat the military leaders, men and women whose uniforms carried medals and ribbons that spoke of battles fought and survived. Hi, Admiral Chen Weiming rose to greet her. He was an older human with gray hair and kind eyes, but Sylith noticed the steel beneath his gentle manner. This was a being who had seen death and dealt it in return. Ambassador Sylith, he said, his voice warm but careful. The United Terran Assembly welcomes you. Please, tell us why you have traveled so far. Sylith took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them everything, holding nothing back. She described the beauty of her homeworld, the gentle nature of her people, the horrors the Drath had committed against other civilizations. She showed them images of draft slave camps where captured aliens worked until they died, of worlds burned to ash because their inhabitants had resisted when she finished. The chamber was silent. Silas saw emotions flicker across human faces: anger, sympathy, and something else she could not quite identify. Admiral Chun spoke quietly with his fellow officers for several minutes. Silas waited, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the Admiral turned back to face her. "Ambassador, humanity does not ignore the suffering of innocent people. We will help you." Hope exploded in Silas's chest like a supernova, but the Admiral raised his hand before she could speak. "However, I must be honest with you. Our main battle fleets are deployed across 3 different sectors of space. The first fleet is defending our colony at Kepler 442. The second fleet is engaged in peacekeeping operations near the Orion Nebula. The third fleet is undergoing repairs after a recent conflict. Recalling any of them would take months, time your people do not have." The hope in Silas' chest began to dim. "Then what can you send us?" Admiral Chun's expression was grave. "The only force available immediately is the 7th Reserve Fleet. It consists of 40 ships, crewed primarily by cadets in training, veterans who have retired from active duty, and personnel recovering from injuries. These are not our finest vessels or our most experienced warriors. 40 ships." Silas felt her skin turn the pale blue of despair. The Drath had 2,000 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity could field. 40 against 2,000 was not a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. "I understand your disappointment," Admiral Chun said softly, "but I want you to understand something about humanity, Ambassador. We do not measure strength in numbers alone. The men and women of the 7th Reserve Fleet have something the Drath cannot comprehend." "What is that?" Silas asked. The Admiral smiled, and for a moment Silas saw something ancient and dangerous flash in his eyes. "They have nothing left to prove, and nothing left to lose. They are warriors who have already faced death and refuse to surrender. The Drath expect enemies who will break when the odds turn against them. They have never faced humans who simply refuse to stop fighting." He stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "We will send what we have, Ambassador. I only hope it will be enough. But I will tell you this. If the 7th Reserve Fleet falls, they will make the Drath pay such a terrible price that the enemy will think twice before ever threatening the innocent again." Silas took his hand. Feeling the warmth of human skin against her own cool flesh, she did not know if 40 ships could save her people. But for the first time since the Drath had appeared on the horizon, she felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. Captain Elara Vance stood on the bridge of the THS Defiance and watched her crew prepare for what everyone knew might be their final mission. The old cruiser hummed beneath her feet, its engines vibrating with a familiar rhythm she had known for 15 years. This ship had been her home through 3 wars and countless battles. And now the Admiralty had decided it was time for the Defiance to be taken apart for scrap metal. She ran her hand along the worn console where countless officers had stood before her. Burn marks still scarred the ceiling from an explosion that had killed her previous first officer. A patch of mismatched armor covered the hole where an enemy missile had nearly torn the ship in half. The Defiance was old and tired and held together by determination more than engineering, but she was still alive. And that meant she could still fight. "Captain." Incoming transmission from Fleet Command. Vance nodded at her communications officer, a young cadet named Torres, who had been aboard for only 3 months. "Put it through." Admiral Chun's face appeared on the main screen, his expression serious but confident. "Captain Vance, you have received your orders. The 7th Reserve Fleet will jump to the Valkyrie system within 6 hours. You have been appointed Fleet Commander." "Understood, Admiral." "We will not let you down." Chun smiled slightly. I know you will not, Alara. Bring your people home. The transmission ended, and Vance turned to face her bridge crew. They were watching her with eyes that held fear and courage in equal measure. She saw Torres gripping his console so tightly his knuckles had turned white. She saw Lieutenant Commander Okonko at the weapons station, a veteran of 40 years who had come out of retirement when the call went out. She saw Ensign Yamamoto at navigation, barely 20 years old and already showing the steady nerve of a natural pilot. You all know what we are facing, Vance said, her voice cutting through the silence. 2,000 enemy warships against our 40. Those are bad odds by any measure. But I have served with many of you through battles that should have killed us, and we are still here. We survived because we refused to give up, because we trusted each other, because we remembered that we fight not for glory, but for the people who cannot fight for themselves. She paused and looked at each face in turn. The Valkyrie asked for help, and we answered. That is what humanity does. We do not abandon the innocent, and we do not surrender to tyrants. Today, we show the galaxy what the 7th Reserve Fleet is made of. Okonkwo grinned, his dark face creased with scars from battles long past. About time someone gave us a proper fight, Captain. 6 hours later, the 7th Reserve Fleet assembled at the jump point. Vance studied the formation on her tactical display and felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. 40 ships hung in the darkness of space, and every single one of them bore the marks of combat. The THS, Relentless, had lost half its hull plating at the Battle of Sirius, and now flew with exposed framework that made it look like a skeleton. The THS Hammer had been declared destroyed 3 times and rebuilt 3 times, each version slightly different from the last. The THS Mercy was a hospital ship that had been fitted with weapons after its medical staff demanded the right to fight alongside their patients. These were not gleaming warships fresh from the construction yards. These were survivors, veterans of humanity's bloodiest conflicts. Ships that had been written off and forgotten by everyone except the crews who loved them. The fleet jumped, reality twisting around them as they crossed the vast distances between stars in the blink of an eye when they emerged in the Valkyrie system. Ambassador Silith was waiting for them aboard the Defiance. She had insisted on accompanying the fleet, wanting to witness whatever fate awaited her people. Vance had agreed, though she suspected the ambassador would soon regret that decision. Silith stared at the viewscreen showing the human fleet, her bioluminescent skin flickering with colors Vance did not recognize. These are your ships? She whispered. These are our ships, Vance confirmed. They are wounded. They are scarred. Some of them look like they should not even be able to fly. Commander Okonkwo laughed, a deep rumbling sound that filled the bridge. Ambassador, every ship you see out there has tasted battle and survived. Every crew member has buried friends and kept fighting. We are not pretty, but we do not break. Silith turned to face the old warrior, her expression troubled. But how can 40 damaged vessels hope to stand against 2,000? Okonkwo's smile faded, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Because the Drath have never fought humans before. They do not know what we are. They see small numbers and old ships and think they have already won. They do not understand that we were not built for display. We were built for war. The tactical alarm shrieked, cutting through the conversation like a knife. Contact, Torres announced, his voice tight with fear. Enemy fleet entering sensor range. 2,047 vessels, all Drath military configuration. Vance watched the display as red icons flooded the screen. The Drath fleet moved in perfect formation, thousands of ships arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of rigid discipline and overwhelming firepower. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like a storm approaching across an open plain. They are hailing us, Torres said. Put it through. The view screen flickered and a Drath commander appeared. He was tall and armored in black metal, with 4 eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. When he spoke, his voice dripped with contempt. "Human vessels, I am Supreme Commander Verteth of the Drath Hegemony. You are trespassing in space that now belongs to us. Surrender immediately, and we will grant you quick deaths. Resist, and we will make your suffering legendary." Vance stood slowly, straightening her uniform as she faced the screen. "Supreme Commander, I am Captain Alara Vance of the United Terran Navy. We have come to answer the call of our friends, the Velkari. Your threats do not frighten us." Verteth laughed, the sound like metal scraping against stone. 40 ships against 2,000. You are either brave or insane. Vance smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Probably both. But before you attack, I want you to consider something. And what is that? You should have brought more ships. The transmission cut off, and Vance turned to her crew. They were grinning now. Fear transformed into something fiercer and more defiant. All hands to battle stations. Charge all weapons. Today we teach the Drath what it means to fight humanity. The 7th Reserve Fleet spread out into attack formation. 40 wounded ships facing an armada that could have conquered worlds. Ambassador Silith watched in amazement as humans moved with calm efficiency, preparing for a battle they could not possibly win, and yet somehow, impossibly, they did not seem afraid. They seemed eager. Supreme Commander Varteth watched the human fleet on his tactical display and felt nothing but amusement. These primitives had sent 40 ships against his armada, 40 outdated vessels that looked like they had been pulled from a salvage yard. He had crushed larger forces with a fraction of his fleet. "All ships, advance and destroy," he commanded. "Leave no survivors." The Drath Armada surged forward, 2,000 warships moving as one. Their formation was perfect, each vessel holding its position with mathematical precision. This was how civilized species fought, with order, with discipline. With overwhelming force applied like a hammer, the humans did something Verteth did not expect. They scattered one moment, the human fleet was holding formation. The next, every single ship broke away in a different direction. They split apart like seeds in a wind, racing toward the edges of the Drath formation, instead of meeting the charge head-on. "What are they doing?" Verteth demanded. "Are they fleeing?" His tactical officers studied the displays with growing confusion. "No, Supreme Commander. They appear to be attacking, but their movements make no sense. There is no pattern, no coordination." Verteth was about to laugh at human incompetence when the first explosion ripped through his fleet. A human destroyer had dove straight into the heart of a Drath squadron, weaving between the larger ships with impossible agility. Before anyone could react, it fired a spread of missiles that detonated against the shields of 3 different vessels. The shields held, but the distraction had worked. While the Drath focused on the destroyer, 2 other human ships appeared from below and opened fire with weapons that burned like small sun's kinetic railguns. Varteth realized with shock. The humans were using kinetic weapons, primitive projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. These weapons had been abandoned by advanced civilizations thousands of years ago in favor of elegant energy beams. They were crude, brutal, and devastatingly effective against shields designed to deflect modern armaments. Drath shields flickered and failed as hypersonic slugs tore through them like paper. Explosions blossomed across the formation as human ships struck from every angle. "Return fire," Varteth roared. "Destroy them." His gunners tried, but the humans refused to stay still. They dodged and weaved with an agility that seemed impossible for vessels their size. When one ship took damage, it did not retreat. It continued fighting while its crew worked frantically to restore power. When a human vessel was finally destroyed, its crew launched escape pods, even as the ship made one final ramming run against the nearest enemy on the bridge of the Defiance. Captain Vance watched her tactical display with cold calculation. Her mind processed information faster than any computer could, tracking the movement of every ship in the battle, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting opportunities, hammer and relentless. Flank left and target their command cluster, she ordered. Mercy, I need you to draw fire from Sector 7. Torres, signal the cadets in Wolf Squadron. Tell them to stop showing off and start putting rounds on target. Ambassador Silith watched in horrified fascination. She had never seen anything like this. Valkyrie ships, when her people had possessed them long ago, had moved in graceful formations designed to minimize risk and maximize efficiency. Humans fought like wild animals, unpredictable and savage, and terrifyingly effective. How are they doing this? She whispered. Your ships are outnumbered 50-1. Commander Okonkwo answered without taking his eyes off the weapons console. The Drath fight to prove they are superior. They want to crush their enemies with overwhelming force because it feeds their pride. Humans fight to win. We do not care about glory or honor or looking impressive. We care about destroying our enemies by whatever means necessary. He fired a spread of torpedoes that caught a draft cruiser in its engine section. The enemy ship spun out of control and collided with 2 of its companions. Also, Okonkwo added with grim satisfaction. We cheat. Silith turned to a Valkyrie historian who had accompanied her. An elderly scholar named Tethro who had spent his life studying alien species. What are they? She asked him. What kind of beings fight like this? Tethro was pale, his skin drained of color by what he was witnessing. They evolved as persistence predators, he said quietly. On their home world, humans did not hunt by being the fastest or the strongest. They hunted by chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They would follow an animal for days, never stopping, never resting, until the creature simply could not run anymore. He gestured at the battle raging outside the window. They bring that same mentality to war. They do not need to be stronger than their enemies. They only need to outlast them. They will absorb losses that would break any other species, and they will keep fighting until their enemy cannot fight anymore. Varteth was beginning to understand this. 4 hours into the battle, he had lost over 200 ships. The humans had lost only 6. His perfect formation had dissolved into chaos as his captains tried to chase enemies that refused to stay in one. Place focus fire, he screamed at his subordinates. Concentrate on one ship at a time. But when his fleet targeted one human vessel, 3 others would appear and rake his ships with devastating fire. When his cruisers pursued a fleeing destroyer, they flew directly into ambush that left them burning. The humans seemed to know exactly where his ships would be before they got there. Supreme Commander, his tactical officer said, voice trembling. They are using our own communications against us. Every order we transmit, they intercept and exploit. They know our movements before we make them, then switch to encrypted channels. We have Supreme Commander. They break the encryption within minutes. Verteth slammed his fist against his throne. This was impossible. No primitive species should be able to match Drath military technology. No inferior race should be able to stand against the might of the hegemony. Transmission came through, and Captain Vance's face appeared on his screen. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and smoke drifted across her bridge. But she was smiling. Supreme Commander, you have lost over 200 ships, and we are just getting started. I offer you one chance to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave this system, and we will let you go. Continue this attack, and we will destroy every single one of you. Verteth bared his teeth in rage. You are bluffing. You cannot sustain these losses. Your fleet is too small. Vance laughed, and the sound sent chills down the spines of every Drath who heard it. We are humans, Supreme Commander. We do not know how to give up. Ask yourself this question. Even if you win today, how many ships will you have left? Will it be enough to hold this territory? Will it be enough to defend against our real fleets when they arrive? She leaned closer to the camera. We sent our weakest fleet to answer this call. Imagine what we would send if we were truly angry. The transmission ended. Verth stared at the screen for a long moment. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt doubt. 12 hours. The battle had raged for 12 hours without pause, and the void of space was filled with burning wreckage and drifting bodies. Captain Ilara Vance had not slept, had not eaten, had barely moved from her command chair. Her uniform was stained with blood and soot, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. But she refused to rest. The Defiance shuddered as another enemy salvo struck her weakened shields. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the ship groaned like a wounded animal. Shields down to 7%. Torres shouted. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 6. We have lost contact with Engineering Section 3. Vance gripped the arms of her chair. Where is Chief Kowalski? Still in the main engine room, Captain. He reports that reactor containment is holding, but we have maybe 30 minutes before the whole system fails. 30 minutes. Vance looked at her tactical display and felt her heart clench. The 7th Reserve Fleet had been reduced to 22 ships. 18 vessels had been destroyed, their crews either dead or drifting in escape pods. But the Drath had paid dearly for every human ship they had claimed. Over 400 enemy vessels had been reduced to burning debris. 400 ships. It was a victory beyond anything anyone had expected. But there were still nearly 1,600 Drath warships out there. And the humans were running out of ammunition, running out of power, running out of time. Captain, Commander Okonkwo said quietly, I am receiving reports from across the fleet. Ammunition reserves are critical on most ships. The Relentless has lost all primary weapons and is fighting with point defense guns. The Hammer reports that half their crew is dead or wounded. Vance closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of all the young cadets who had joined this mission with dreams of glory, now facing the reality of war's terrible cost. She thought of the veterans who had come out of retirement for one last fight, giving their lives so that others might live. What about the Mercy? Okonkwo hesitated. The Mercy rammed a Drath carrier 20 minutes ago. Captain Reeves ordered all hands to abandon ship, then stayed behind to steer the vessel into the enemy's reactor core. The explosion took out the carrier and 3 escorts. Vance felt tears burn in her eyes, but she would not let them fall. Not now. Not when her crew needed her to be strong. Status of the enemy fleet? The Drath have regrouped under Vateth's command. They are forming up for a massive assault. Our analysts believe they intend to overwhelm us with a single coordinated strike. Ambassador Silith approached the command chair. Her skin had turned the deep gray of mourning, and her eyes glistened with tears. Captain Vance, your people have done more than anyone could have asked. Perhaps it is time to retreat. Save what remains of your fleet. Vance looked at the alien ambassador and smiled sadly. Ambassador, do you know what my grandfather told me when I joined the Navy? He said that a true warrior does not fight because she knows she will win. She fights because there are things worth fighting for, things more important than survival. She stood and faced her crew. They were watching her with eyes full of pain and determination. These were her people, her family, and she loved them more than words could express. Your people asked for our help, Ambassador. We gave our word. Humans do not break their word, even when it costs us everything. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Marcus Kowalski worked frantically to keep the Defiance alive. His prosthetic leg sparked with each step, damaged by a conduit explosion hours ago, but he refused to stop moving. Around him, his team worked with the desperate efficiency of people who knew death was breathing down their necks. Kowalski to bridge. He called through his communicator. I have an idea, but you are not going to like it. Tell me. Vance replied. I can reroute power from life support to the weapons grid. It will give us maybe triple our current firepower for about 10 minutes. But after that, we will not have enough oxygen to keep the crew alive. There was a long pause before Vance answered. Do it, Captain. The crew. The crew knows what they signed up for, Chief. We can survive in vacuum for 3 minutes if we have to. That is 3 minutes of fighting time. Make those minutes count. Kowalski laughed despite himself. He had served with Alara Vance for 15 years, and she had never once asked her crew to do anything she would not do herself. Understood, Captain. Rerouting power now. On the bridge, the lights dimmed as power was drawn away from non-essential systems. The air grew thin and cold, and crew members reached for emergency oxygen masks. Vance opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Captain Vance. I will not lie to you. We are facing the end. The Drath are preparing their final assault, and we do not have the strength to stop them through conventional means. But I have a plan, and it requires every one of you to trust me. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, but they were also ready. For the past 12 hours, we have been seeding the battlefield with mines hidden among the debris. Thousands of warheads scattered across every sector where we have fought. The Drath do not know they are there. When they charge, I need every ship to fall back toward grid coordinate 772. Lead them into the minefield. Make them think we are retreating. Commander Okonkwo grinned savagely. A trap within a trap. I love it. When the mines detonate, the survivors will be scattered and confused. That is when we hit them with everything we have left. Every missile, every torpedo, every gun that still works. We give them one final push and break their will to fight. She took a deep breath. I will not order you to follow me. This plan might not work. We might all die in the next hour. But if we succeed, we save the Valkyrie. We show the galaxy what humanity is made of. We prove that 40 ships crewed by rejects and misfits can stand against an empire. The channel crackled with responses from across the fleet. Voices overlapped, captains and crew members speaking as one. We are with you. Captain, for humanity, for the Valkyrie, let them come. Vance smiled. And for a moment the exhaustion and pain faded away. These were her people, and she had never been prouder. All ships, begin withdrawal to grid 772. Make it look real, make them hungry. And when the trap is sprung, show them what the 7th Reserve Fleet can do. The human ships began to fall back, and the Drath fleet surged forward like sharks smelling blood. They did not see the death waiting for them in the darkness. Supreme Commander Varteth watched the human fleet retreat and felt triumph surge through his veins. Finally, the primitives had broken. Finally, they understood that they could not stand against the might of the Drath hegemony. All ships pursue. He commanded, do not let a single human vessel escape. We will crush them completely. His armada charged forward, 1,600 warships hungry for blood. They had lost over 400 vessels in 12 hours, a humiliating toll that demanded vengeance. Varteth intended to make the humans pay for every Drath life. With 1,000 of their own, the human ships fled in apparent disorder, their damaged vessels limping toward a sector of space filled with debris from earlier battles. It seemed like a desperate retreat, the final gasp of a defeated enemy. It was exactly what Captain Vance wanted him to think. Steady, Vance whispered on the bridge of the Defiance. Let them come closer. Let them think they have won. The Drath fleet compressed as it pursued, ships packing closer together to maximize their firepower. They entered the debris field without hesitation, confident in their superiority. Now? Commander Okonkwo asked. His finger hovering over the weapon's console, Vance watched the tactical display. The main body of the Drath fleet had entered the kill zone. This was the moment everything depended on. Now, she pressed a button on her command. Chair space itself seemed to catch fire. Thousands of mines detonated simultaneously. Hidden among the wreckage and debris where the humans had placed them throughout the battle. The explosions rippled through the Drath formation like a wave of destruction. Nuclear fire bloomed in the darkness, each blast triggering chain reactions as damaged ships collided with their neighbors. The perfect Drath formation became chaos in an instant. Ships tumbled out of control, their systems overloaded by electromagnetic pulses. Commanders screamed orders that went unheard over the static. Vessels crashed into each other as pilots tried desperately to escape the inferno. 800 Drath ships were destroyed in the first 10 seconds on Varteth's flagship. Alarms screamed as the ship shook from multiple impacts. The tactical display showed nothing but static and destruction. His proud fleet had been reduced to a scattered mass of burning wreckage. What happened? He demanded. How did they? He never finished the question. The human fleet had stopped retreating. 22 damaged ships turned as one and plunged back into the chaos. They came with weapons blazing, every gun firing, every missile launching. The Defiance led the charge, her newly boosted weapons carving through enemy vessels with devastating precision. Captain Vance stood on her bridge, oxygen mask over her face, watching her crew fight with everything they had left. The air was thin and cold, barely enough to breathe, but nobody complained. They were too busy winning. Target Varteth's flagship. Vance ordered, "Take out their command." The Defiance and 3 other human ships focused their fire on the massive Drath command vessel. Shields collapsed under the combined assault, and armor plates melted away. The flagship tried to flee, but a spread of torpedoes from the Relentless crippled its engines. "They are dead in space, Captain," Okonkwo reported. "Shall I finish them?" Vance considered for a moment. "No, I want that ship intact. Prepare a boarding party." "Boarding party?" Ambassador Sylith asked in disbelief. "You want to capture the enemy flagship?" "I want Varteth alive. I want him to surrender personally. I want the entire Drath hegemony to see their supreme commander defeated by a handful of human soldiers." 12 Marines launched from the Defiance in a small assault shuttle. They were exhausted, wounded, running on nothing but determination and spite. Sergeant Maya Chen led them, her arm broken and wrapped in a makeshift sling. But her eyes burned with fierce resolve. They breached the flagship's hull and fought their way through corridors filled with panicking Drath soldiers. The aliens had never faced humans in close combat before. They did not understand that these small creatures could be so fast, so vicious. So utterly unwilling to stop, Sergeant Chun found Varteth in his command center, surrounded by guards who threw down their weapons the moment they saw the Marines enter. The Supreme Commander stood alone, his 4 eyes wide with shock. "I am Sergeant Maya Chun of the United Terran Navy," she said, pointing her rifle at his face. "You are under arrest for crimes against the peaceful species of this galaxy. Do you surrender?" Varteth looked at this small human with her broken arm and blood-stained armor. He looked at the Marines behind her, battered and wounded but standing tall. He looked at the burning wreckage visible through his window. "The remains of his mighty fleet. I surrender," he whispered. The battle was over. When the debris cleared and the final counts came in, the scope of the victory became clear. The Drath had lost over 1,200 ships. The survivors had fled in terror, their will to fight completely broken. The Valkyrie homeworld was safe. The 7th Reserve Fleet had lost 26 ships, but 14 remained. Damaged beyond recognition, barely able to fly, but still alive. Over 2,000 human crew members had died, but 3,000 more had survived to see victory. Ambassador Sylith stood on the bridge of the Defiance as Captain Vance gave orders for the fleet to stand down. The human woman looked like she might collapse at any moment, kept upright only by sheer willpower. "You did it," Silas said softly. "You saved my people," Vance smiled, her face gray with exhaustion. "We kept our word." "That is all. But how?" Silas asked. "How did 40 ships defeat 2,000? Commander Okonkwo answered from his station. "Ambassador, you asked us once what kind of beings fight like this. I will tell you the truth. We are a species that learned to survive against impossible odds. Our ancestors crossed frozen continents, sailed stormy seas, and explored hostile worlds. We have faced extinction countless times and refused to die." He gestured at the stars outside the window. The Drath thought they were fighting a small fleet. They were actually fighting 10,000 years of human history. Every ancestor who ever refused to surrender, every warrior who ever stood against darkness. They never had a chance. 3 months later, the galactic community gathered for a summit to discuss the implications of the battle. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now watched the Terran delegation with newfound respect and fear. The elder races quietly updated their threat assessments. Trade agreements with humanity became suddenly more favorable. Diplomatic insults ceased entirely. When human ambassadors entered a room, other species stood in the great archives of the Valkyrie Collective. A new entry was added to their encyclopedia of spacefaring species. Humans, classification, persistence predators. Threat level extreme. Recommendation: do not engage. Do not provoke. If they offer friendship, accept it with gratitude. If they offer help, understand that they will pay any price to keep their word. They sent their weakest fleet to save us, and it was enough to break an empire we did not wish to see what they send when they are truly angry. Captain Elara Vance retired from active service 6 months after the battle. She spent her remaining years teaching at the Naval Academy, sharing stories of the 7th Reserve Fleet with new generations of officers. When asked about the battle, she always said the same thing: we were not heroes. We were just ordinary people who refused to give up. That is the human way. That is what makes us strong. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Drath hegemony rebuilt its forces and remembered the lesson they had. Learned never underestimate humanity, never corner them, never. Give them a reason to send their strongest. Fleet, because the weakest had been enough to break an empire, and the strongest might be enough to end one.